Sarah Miller sat on the beige sofa of her Upper West Side apartment, the dim evening sun casting long shadows across the living room. She nervously twisted her wedding ring, the glint of gold catching the fading light. Across from her, John Miller was just arriving home from work, setting down his briefcase and loosening his tie. The silence between them had grown heavier over the past few months, and Sarah could no longer carry the weight of her thoughts. "John," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "can we talk?" John glanced at her with a concerned look and nodded. He sat beside her, his posture tense. Sarah inhaled deeply, her fingers trembling. "I have been thinking about our marriage," she said, "and I feel like we are stuck. We love each other, I know we do, but I feel like we have become roommates. I want us to feel alive again." John's brow furrowed. "What are you saying, Sarah?" She took another breath. "I want to try an open marriage. Just to see if it brings us closer in a different way." John leaned back, the shock evident on his face. "Are you serious? An open marriage? Where is this coming from?" Sarah could not meet his eyes. "I have read about it. People say it can actually strengthen the bond. I just want to feel something different. But I do not want to lose you." He stood up, pacing. The silence between them returned, heavier than before. Neither of them knew then that this single conversation would unravel everything they had built over the past 12 years. New boundaries. The next morning brought no resolution, only more questions. John had slept in the guest room, and Sarah had laid awake all night, listening to the soft hum of the city below. Over coffee, they agreed to talk again, to define what this new arrangement would mean. "No emotional attachments," John said firmly. "And we are always honest. No secrets." Sarah nodded, though her chest felt tight. "No falling in love. Just experiences." They set ground rules. No mutual friends. Always protection. No overnights. Weekly check-ins. It felt clinical, like negotiating a business deal. But they both agreed to try. Sarah downloaded a dating app that evening, her hands shaking as she created a profile. She kept it simple. Her picture was soft, natural. She called herself open-minded and honest. It did not take long before messages started coming in. Most were crude, but one stood out. Mark Thompson. His message was thoughtful, witty. He asked questions about her favorite books and what made her laugh. His profile said he was 30, British, and worked in advertising. Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. They began chatting. The first meeting. They agreed to meet in a bar downtown. Sarah wore a simple black dress and left her wedding ring in the drawer. She told John the truth. He nodded silently. The bar buzzed with laughter and jazz music. Mark was already there, leaning casually against the counter. He stood up as she approached. "Sarah," he said with a warm smile. "Evening." He had kind eyes, a confident posture. They sat and talked. 4 hours. About art, about travel, about the strange ironies of life. She laughed freely, more than she had in months. He walked her to a cab. Did not kiss her. Just touched her hand. "Let me know if you would like to see me again," he said. She did. Crossing the line. Weeks passed. Sarah and Mark met again and again. Dinners turned to walks, walks turned to kisses, and soon, kisses turned into nights spent in hotel rooms. She broke their rules. She stayed overnight. She felt something. She told herself it was just lust. But it was more. Mark listened, deeply. He looked at her like she was the only person in the room. He did not ask her to leave her husband. He just existed in a world that felt separate from her responsibilities. One morning, she came home and found John making breakfast. He looked up with tired eyes. "You stayed out." Sarah nodded, unable to lie. John turned back to the stove. The eggs burned. The guilt. Sarah began to feel it in small moments. When John reached for her hand in the movie theater and she flinched. When he surprised her with flowers and she cried alone in the bathroom. She tried to stop seeing Mark. Told him she needed space. But then days later, she texted him again. She was living two lives. One with John, who still kissed her goodnight. One with Mark, who made her feel seen. But each life made the other harder to bear. And then came the weekend getaway. John had planned it. A cabin upstate. Fresh air. No phones. They sat by the fire, drank wine, and for a moment, it felt like before. But Sarah broke. In the middle of the night, she whispered, "I am seeing someone." I broke our rules. John stared at the ceiling. Silent. Cracks in the foundation. John did not raise his voice. He did not leave. He simply withdrew. The silence became deeper. At breakfast, he barely touched his food. At night, he slept facing the wall. Sarah knew she had fractured something that might never heal. She tried to be attentive, to rekindle warmth. But the distance remained. John spent more time at work. When he was home, he immersed himself in books or late-night walks. Sarah sat alone in their living room, phone in hand, tempted to call Mark. She did. Two worlds. Mark welcomed her with open arms. He did not ask questions. He offered her wine, a warm blanket, and a space where she could breathe. Sarah stayed with him for 2 nights in a row. She sent John a message saying she needed space. He replied with a single word. "Okay." At Mark's apartment, she felt adored. But guilt seeped into every kiss. Her mind drifted to John, eating dinner alone, brushing his teeth alone, sleeping in silence. And yet, she did not leave. John's turn. Sarah returned home after 4 days. The apartment was clean. John's shoes were neatly by the door. He sat on the couch, watching a documentary. He looked calm. Empty. "I went on a date," he said, eyes still on the screen. Sarah froze. Her heart pounded. "We had dinner. It was nice." Sarah felt a wave of nausea. The rules, once hers to bend, now bent against her. That night, they barely spoke. The air between them was filled with resentment, confusion, and the unspoken realization that their experiment had taken on a life of its own. Disconnection. They lived like strangers sharing a home. Chores were done in silence. Meals were separate. The intimacy was gone. Sarah saw Mark frequently, but each meeting felt heavier. She started questioning everything. Was it freedom she wanted? Or escape? Did she love Mark? Did she still love John? John, meanwhile, began dating more openly. He went out often, came home late. Sometimes he would come back smelling like perfume. Sarah said nothing, but it crushed her. The open marriage had become a trap. Neither of them knew how to close it. Confession. On a rainy Tuesday evening, Sarah sat John down. No distractions. No pretenses. "I cannot do this anymore," she said. "I feel like I am losing myself. I do not know who I am in this marriage now." John looked at her, eyes tired. "Do you want to end it?" Sarah shook her head. "I want us back. I want to stop. All of it. Mark. The open marriage. Everything." John did not respond right away. Then he said, "I do not know if I can. Not yet." Her heart cracked a little more. The goodbye. Sarah met Mark one last time. She told him everything. "I thought I could handle it," she said. "But I was wrong. I used you to escape. I am sorry." Mark nodded. There was sadness in his eyes, but also understanding. "Take care of yourself, Sarah." She left his apartment in the rain, umbrella forgotten, tears mixing with the downpour. It felt like grieving a part of herself. Reflection. Weeks passed. Sarah and John stopped dating other people. Not because they decided to. It just happened. The energy had faded. They spoke more. Slowly. Awkwardly. They began going on walks again. Shared small meals. Laughed, once or twice. There was no grand gesture. No sudden forgiveness. Just two people trying to find pieces of what they lost. An honest moment. John and Sarah sat on a park bench one morning. The air was crisp. Sarah sipped her coffee. "Do you still love me?" she asked. John looked at her. "Yes. But it is different now. Not worse. Just different." She nodded. That was enough. Starting over. They agreed to therapy. They rebuilt routines. They revisited memories. Slowly, they created new ones. The wounds did not vanish, but they became part of the story. A reminder. A warning. A scar. Sarah returned to writing. John joined a book club. They found themselves, and each other, in new ways. Silent regret. Sarah often thought about that first conversation. The night she suggested an open marriage. She never stopped regretting it. Not because of what it led to, but because of what it revealed. Love is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, unnoticed, until it is gone. She sat beside John on the sofa, their hands quietly entwined. And in the silence, she finally understood what it meant to be whole again.